Hi, good morning all. So we're moving on. Um, we're moving on to Surah 102, right? Fair Allah, right? Fair consequences for action, right? The chapter, the surah is entitled Competition and Increase, right? And it is talking basically against that, against competing, right? Um, and it is not that competition is bad, right? Because there are certain sports and so on in which people compete and so on, right? And it's competition to help you and to help other people as well, right? You play sports, you compete with not only other person, but you're competing with yourself basically to become better, right? Now there are certain forms of sports that are prohibited in Islam. That's something that I really have to look into or talk to somebody to get appropriate knowledge on, because I don't have that insight as yet as to what sport is. But when I do, I will share it, right, about specific sports in truth that is actually prohibited in Islam, right, or not, right? But personally, I don't think sports should be a problem in Islam. What the problem is that um, what people have to go through to get into certain organizations that run sports and so on. Those are the things that, in terms of large sport and events and arenas and all that, things people have to go through to become a part of that or to get through. Similar with the entertainment industry and so on, to get into those things, whether it's racism, classism, all these things involved, right? Colorism involved and so on, and to getting into these industries, regardless of how driven or how talented you are in a particular area, right? Because of things like skin color or caste or whatever it is, right? To get into this, anyhow, right? So competition in the worldly life diverts you, right? So competing against what as I say, are racing to see if your soul is better, right? When you're doing these things, you striving to become a better person. You want strive in the cause of Allah, right? It has nothing to do with anybody else in the world, right? You strive in the cause of Allah to make Allah happy and content with you, right? And you do it for your own soul, right? As well as you do it as a natural inclination, you want to help others and so on, right? But you don't compete as in I want to be better than another human being by doing XYZ, right? So that's the mindset you should have when you are striving to be a better person, right? Not striving to be better than somebody else, right, in character or personality or so on, but striving in the cause of Allah one, and striving for the sake of your own soul, right, as well as your inclination to do good unto others, right? So competition in the worldly life, it diverts you until you visit graveyards, right? Until you basically have a meeting with death, right? So we compete in this life with regard to all sorts of things. But then when we meet death, right, when we come into contact with death, right, that humbles us. That lets us know, hey, well, everything that you've been fighting for and competing for is basically nonsensical, and for want of a better word, right? Nonsensical to an extent, right? In terms of when you reach a point where you have to get your mindset ready to face that, right? So you are going to know, right? Then know, right? Because when you're on this journey and so on, there will be forces that are trying to interrupt that journey, right? So the book is saying you are going to know, then know, right? Because forces will try to interrupt this. But the book is saying that you are going to know, right? You are going to have knowledge or certainty, be certain about certain things, right? Right. The book says if you only knew with a knowledge of certainty, you will surely see the hellfire, right? Meaning that if you knew certain things for certain, right, you will experience what is called trial by fire, right? Trial by fire, you will see hellfire, right? Because the forces in the world, the evil forces in the world, are so heavy and so much, right, that you're going to witness this, right? You're going to see it, and it's an unfortunate thing, but these things are things that we have to battle with, right? That is not just an internal battle, right? It's also a battle coming from externally as well, right? So you will surely see it with the eye of certainty, right? And on that day you will be asked about the day of pleasure, right? What used to give you pleasure and so on, right? What used to give you pleasure and so on. You will be questioned about these things, right? So this is what the book is saying, right? And is actually a warning for people who do certain things regarding consent and so on, right? Invasions are people do all sort of things, invade, right? Whether you invade and people country, invading people mind, people body, right? Whether it's spiritual invasion, whether it's technological invasion, phone hacking, all this is a warning for these things, MK Ultra, all these things to put an end to it, right? Because the consequences of those things, right, will be, and this is a warning, right? It will be severe, and that's why we putting an end to these sorts of things, right? Tormenting, torturing people, and so on, whether it's psychologically, is mentally, is spiritually, right? Is physically, right? We are putting an end to these scenarios, right? So this brings an end to 102, and we will persist with 103, inshallah, right? God's willing, tomorrow, right?